Hi guys, this is Dan. Welcome back to my channel. If you know me well, or you can tell from my reading plan of 2025, I always love a fantasy book subscription and their special edition, as you can tell on these shelves here. I used to have more, but now I'm just limiting myself to two, the Broken Binding Fantasy subscription and the Inkstone quarterly one. I am thinking if I decided to keep this book subscription, why not to see if they worth my money or not. So in today's video, I will try to review the Broken Binding Fantasy book subscription. If you don't care about any book subscription at all, you can still watch this video because what I'm going to do is not just about the subscription, but also share my thoughts about all the books that I have received and already finished. Also, I will try to avoid as much spoilers as I can. So after watching this video, and if you are interested in the series I am going to talk about, you can still go and pick this one up and it won't spoil your reading experience. If you haven't heard about the Broken Binding before, I think it is a UK-based book company that offers monthly fantasy book subscription and a bi-monthly sci-fi one. What makes the Broken Binding Fantasy subscription so different from the rest that you can find is that it usually picks a series that is already completed rather than a new release. So in today's video, I am going to talk about the October 2024 to January 2025 pick, and it is, let me try to lift it up, Memory, Sorrow and Thorn series by Ted Williams. So if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like, subscribe to my channel Fantasy so you won't miss anything exciting from me. You can also support me by becoming my Patreon or visiting my Ko-fi. If you want some more daily updates, you can also follow my Instagram, The Fantasy. So without further ado, shall we dive into this book discussion? If you don't know about this series, Memory, Sorrow and Thorn is a very classic high epic fantasy written by Ted Williams. The first book is The Dragonbone Chair, and then we have Stone of Farewell. And this series is concluded by To Green Angel Tower, and this edition I have part 1 and part 2. According to Google, the word count for this whole series is over 1 million. Fun fact here, all the books in the Stormlight Archive, the 5 novels and the novellas, in total only got over 1.2 million words. So more or less the Memory, Sorrow and Thorn series is as long as the Stormlight Archive. Thinking like this series is insane. I made a commitment to myself to try to read a book from this series on a monthly basis. I am not going to lie here. It is quite a lot and it does take time to finish a book because they are all very dense. To quickly summarize what this series is about, like I said, Memory, Sorrow and Thorn is a slow burn, very classic high epic fantasy that is written over 30 years ago, and can you believe it? It is about Simon, a kitchen boy working in a castle. One day he discovered an evil plant hidden here and he has to leave the castle where he grew up. Simon will start his own journey to explore this world ostensibly, but with the more he discovered, the more he found things is out of his control. This series features a huge cast of characters, not just human but also elves, trolls or even dwarf-like beings. As the story progresses, we will also follow other characters besides Simon as our perspectives. The story features a richly detailed world with a rich history, complex character, and the epic struggle between good and evil. My overall comment about this series can be summarized in just one sentence. The pacing is real slow. Book 1 is on the slower side because we are just following the journey of Simon alone. As Simon is someone that has been spending most of his time inside the castle, this new adventure will be quite hard for him because he got so much to learn, so much to understand. Luckily, he was not alone on this journey, so he can survive in the wild. We are also like Simon, a sponge to absorb all this new information about the world building as well. So the pacing of book 1 is definitely not on the fast side, not even until much later of the same book, we finally got a sense of what we should expect from the plot. But from book 2 onwards, I would say this problem slightly improved. We are having more lovely yet complicated characters and relationships. The storyline also expands furthermore, not just limiting to Simon alone. Yes, we are still following the good old battle between the good and the evil, but all these characters will try to find their way to prevent the worst to happen. There are also some interesting dramas brought out by these new storylines and add so much more dynamics to the plot. Maybe they are like the side characters in the first book, but since the second book, we finally got a chance to learn to understand what they have gone through, what sort of person they really are. Some characters are quite complex and dark too. So by the end of the last book, we will feel for quite a lot of them because we have gone through life and death with them. Even though they may see as the villain in the story, we will still see why they are like this. But still here, we can actually see the difference between fantasy books that is written 30 years ago and those published now. Although I said the pacing issue would get slightly better from the second book, I still find the pacing for the whole series is on the slower side for me. Quite a lot of time it is like Ted Williams taking his time to introduce this world to us. It could get quite explanative and descriptive, or sometimes it may even have like excess world building, excess details. I guess part of the reason to explain the pacing issue can be down to the fact that there are not too much actions or battles. I promise there will be some, but majority of the plot is like exploration or learning about the history. But the ones that do occur are epic, are significant and impactful. The last battle of this series is possibly the best that I have ever read. It does scream and shout epic. It is really intense to see how our characters pull out what they have learned to try to stop this evil plan. It is also possibly the only time that I don't want to put this series down, and it is nearly the end of this series as well. I am like the kind of reader that needs momentum. So every time when I flip to the next chapter and I see how long it is, I am like, oh my god, here we go again, a long chapter. This feeling is also so much stronger if the next book I read after the Memory, Sorrow and Thorn series is a newer fantasy. I have actually just finished the last book to Green Angel Tower Part 2, and now I'm reading Rise of the Rangers by Philip C. Quintrell, a fantasy book that is published not too long ago, maybe 8 years ago. I can already feel how upbeat this book is compared to Ted Williams. The writing, the pacing is so much more accessible in a sense. So I would say the biggest problem I have while reading this series is definitely about the pacing. I feel like I have questioned it many times when I am reading these books. Do we need that much details here? Not just once I was thinking, should I DNF this series too? So after finishing this series, I always have this question in mind. What if this trilogy do trim out the assets? What this series is going to be like? Maybe we can take the plot of Simon in the very last book as an example. I would say the plot itself is a bit overextended. There were just too many pointless wandering. I know it could act as a way for us, the readers, who have every piece of information from different perspectives, to finally put every piece together. But I would say some moments could have been condensed without losing its impacts. This also links up to another problem I have while reading this trilogy, and I would call it the blackout problem. This problem didn't just happen once but quite consistent throughout this series. Without much spoilers here, it is like after a battle, after a conflict, some of our characters would faint, but then in the next chapter, other characters would tell that person, you are safe now, and let me remind you what has happened in the battlefield when you are not awake. I would say this kind of writing is perhaps a bit on the convenient side. It is okay to use this device once, but If you use it too many times, I would say it is a bit repetitive. Even how this series is concluded is leaning towards this kind of writing, which to be honest, I was a bit let down by it. The other thing here is about the prophecy or the foreshadowing. I think throughout this series, we may have some questions along the way, especially towards the ending. There are some important mysteries waiting for an answer. To be honest, when that reveal hit, I was not totally blown away by it. I think the reason behind is that we don't really have too many questions or mysteries that needs to be answered in this series, and there was not enough smoke to distract you from the truth. If you just pay a little bit more attention, and I do mean a little bit more, you will definitely guess what sort of direction the answer is going for, and it is low-key obvious. So when the time to reveal all the truth, I was not totally blown away by it, and it was a bit underwhelming. Even with all these problems, let's say the pacing, let's say about this kind of foreshadowing, I still think the world building is really rich and intricate. On Simon's journey, he will meet different people coming from different background, history, and culture. There will be people coming from the north who gives Viking vibe, marsh-dwelling men or other mythical creatures you would expect in a fantasy world, let's say trolls and elves. Each one of them got their own history and culture, which was already rich. Different interest group or even some complicated relationships between them. All this just adds so much weight to the world building. This allows the reader to understand different races, different regions, but also to feel for their emotional states in this broader conflict. Moving on, I guess we can also talk about the characters in this trilogy. Like I said, there are different races, people coming from different regions, and it is reflected by the perspectives we're gonna follow as well. We of course gonna have Simon, our kitchen boy, Prince Joshua and his niece Mirabel. I hope I say her name right because I was not listening to the audiobook. Tropinabib and Marshman like T and Mac. There are definitely more perspectives for you to follow in this series, so you can already imagine how big this world gonna be or how complicated and complex this relationship can be. What I do love about them is the growth or the depth of them. Like Simon, I think he's gonna shine a bit more later in the series, and you can tell how much he has grown since the beginning. Imagine you're just like a kitchen boy working in a castle, and suddenly drawn into this evil plan that could potentially destroy the world. I always describe him as like a blank paper in the very first book because he got so much to learn. Starting from the second book, he would grow, thinking what is important to him and then making his own decision. The Simon in the first book, and I know I've been doing it quite a lot of time already, but the books are all here, so I'm doing it. The Simon in the very first book is so different from the Simon in the very last book because he has just grown a lot and learned a lot. Other than this bright character, I also enjoy the storyline of another darker character called Cartridge. He was introduced very early in the series in the first book, and he was like a con artist monk. But as the story unfolds and his journey with Mirabel, we will see the other side of this character, what he has done in the past and how that's gonna shape him as the person now. He is by no means a perfect character. He is morally grey and problematic, but I enjoy his arc in this trilogy, and his ending, great. Speaking of Mirabel, I did enjoy her adventure with Cartridge. She also got a chance to see the world and got so much to learn from this experience. But I just didn't enjoy her in the last book. She suddenly feels so stone cold, but of course I understand what she has gone through and how she treats Simon in part 2 of Green Angel Tower. I didn't like it. Also, their relationships throughout this series, without much spoilers here, I don't think it is well written, or maybe romance, this thing is not the strongest suit for Ted Williams. I don't think the uncertainty between them is handled very well, basically. All in all, after 30 years, I think this fantasy series is still solid in terms of the character work or intricate world building. And you can also see how this series gonna inspire future writer like George R.R. Martin or Patrick Rothfuss. Many elements of this trilogy have been echoed in later works. Ted Williams set a foundation for what to follow in epic fantasy, blending high-stake drama with the exploration of human emotion. Overall, I had a not too bad time reading this series, and I mean they are really heavy as well. If you have time, you can definitely check this series out to see how this inspires other writers. If not, I don't think there's any rush to check it out. So if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like, subscribe to my channel Fantasy so you won't miss anything from me. I'll see you all real soon. Goodbye.